Sometimes the most unexpected repairs don't happen under a car hood, they happen in broken hearts. When a single dad fixed a stranger's car for free, he didn't know his little girl's whispered plea would change all their lives forever. Ethan. Walker had grease on his hands, sweat on his brow, and a heart that still carried the silent weight of being a single father. At 32, he looked older than his age, not because of lines on his face, but because of the burdens that pressed on his shoulders. The small auto repair shop he owned at the edge of town wasn't much, but it paid the bills and kept food on the table for him and his 6-year-old daughter, Lily. Life had been a series of unplanned detours since his wife walked out years ago, leaving him to raise Lily alone. Sometimes he told himself he was okay with it, that he didn't need anyone else. But there were nights when he caught Lily staring at the door like she expected someone to walk in, and that silence cut him deeper than any wound. That Friday afternoon was like any other. The summer sun baked the concrete lot outside his garage, cicadas buzzed in the trees, and Ethan was bent under the hood of an old pickup when he heard the sputtering sound of a car dragging itself onto the lot. It was a silver sedan, dented. At the side, coughing smoke from under the hood as if it had just barely managed to crawl to safety, Ethan wiped his hands on a rag, straightened, and stepped out to meet the driver. The woman behind the wheel looked flustered, strands of dark brown hair falling loose from the bun at the back of her head. She wore a plain white blouse that was slightly wrinkled, and when she got out of the car, Ethan noticed the fatigue in her eyes, the kind you only see in people who've been carrying too much for too long. She offered a small, apologetic smile, tucking her hair behind her ear. "I'm so sorry to bother you," she said. "The car just died on me while I was driving home. Do you think you could take a look? I don't have much money right now, but if you could maybe just tell me what's wrong." Ethan had seen hundreds of customers, but something about her voice caught him. There was honesty in it, not entitlement. He glanced at her car, then back at her. "Pop the hood," he said simply. As she did, Ethan leaned in. It didn't take long to figure out what was wrong. The alternator had gone out, the belts were worn, and the battery had given up the fight. For most people, it would be an expensive fix, at least a few $100s. He straightened up and met her eyes, and for a moment, he hesitated. He knew the look she carried, that silent panic of someone trying to hold everything together when everything was falling apart. Before he could speak, Lily's small voice called out from inside the shop, "Daddy! Daddy! Are you done yet?" Ethan turned his head, and there she was, a tiny whirlwind in pink overalls, clutching her ragged, stuffed bunny. She ran up, her curls bouncing, and grabbed Ethan's hand, tugging. When her wide brown eyes caught sight of the woman, she froze, studied her carefully, and then clutched her bunny closer. The woman bent slightly, offering a soft smile. "Hello there," she said gently. Lily didn't answer. She only stared, her little lips pressed into a line, like she was holding back something too big for words. Ethan squeezed her hand. "This is my daughter, Lily," he said. Then to the woman, "The car needs some serious work, but don't worry, I'll fix it." The woman blinked, taken aback. "But I told you I don't have—" Ethan cut her off. "Don't worry about it, just let me handle it." She stared at him like she wasn't sure if he was serious, then nodded slowly, her lips parting as if she wanted to say thank you but couldn't quite get the words out. She introduced herself as Sarah, and while Ethan worked on the car, she sat quietly on a chair near the entrance, watching. Lily, however, stayed close, sneaking glances at Sarah with a strange mixture of curiosity and longing, as though she was studying something familiar, yet distant. An hour passed with the rhythmic clinking of tools, the occasional grunt from Ethan, and the soft hum of Sarah's voice as she tried making small talk. She told him she was a teacher, that she had moved back into town recently after a difficult divorce, that the car was all she had left from her old life. She didn't go into details, but Ethan didn't push. He understood the unspoken. People who had been broken didn't always need questions. Sometimes they just needed silence that didn't judge them. When the car finally roared back to life, Sarah stood up in disbelief. You fixed it?" she asked, her voice tinged with relief. Ethan wiped his hands and gave a small nod. "She'll run fine now. Just take it easy on her until you can get a proper replacement." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. She fumbled for her purse, but Ethan raised a hand. "Don't," he said firmly. "It's on the house." Her lips trembled. "I can't let you do that. Please, I need to give you something." Ethan shook his head. "Sometimes it's not about money." For a long moment, she just looked at him, her expression softening in a way that made something stir in Ethan's chest, something he hadn't felt in years. But before he could dwell on it, he felt a tug at his shirt. Lily had leaned in close, and in the quietest whisper, she said words that froze him where he stood. "Daddy," she murmured, her little voice trembling but clear. "She's my mom. Please, marry her." The air seemed to stop. Ethan's heart pounded, his throat tightening as he turned to look at his daughter, then back at Sarah, who was adjusting her purse strap, oblivious to what had just been said. He swallowed hard, his hands trembling slightly, and in that instant, Ethan realized that the little girl who rarely spoke of her mother, who often sat at the window waiting for something she couldn't name, had just poured out the secret longing of her heart. Ethan couldn't speak. He only pulled Lily close, his chest aching with emotions he didn't fully understand. Sarah looked at them, confusion flickering across her face, and Ethan quickly forced a smile. "Thanks for stopping by," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. But inside, nothing was steady anymore, because his daughter's whisper had cracked open a door Ethan had bolted shut years ago, the possibility of letting someone in, and he had no idea how to handle it. That night, after Sarah drove away in her now revived sedan, Ethan couldn't shake the echo of Lily's whisper. He tucked her into bed, smoothing back her curls as she hugged her stuffed bunny. But when he leaned down to kiss her forehead, she held on to his shirt and didn't let go. Her big brown eyes shimmered in the dim glow of the bedside lamp. "Daddy," she whispered again, softer this time. "She feels like a mom. Can we keep her?" The innocence of her words nearly broke Ethan. He brushed her cheek gently. "Sweetheart, it doesn't work that way," he said, though his voice caught in his throat. "She's just someone we helped today." Lily pouted, then turned her face into the pillow. "But she smiled like you smile when you're happy, and she looked at me like she already knew me." Ethan froze, staring at his daughter. Children had a way of seeing through things adults buried under logic and fear, but Ethan had lived long enough to know that hope could hurt worse than heartbreak. He tucked the blanket around her and whispered, "Sleep now, baby girl," though his mind was anything but peaceful. Long after Lily's breathing settled into soft rhythm, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold, staring at the silent phone on the counter. He had her number on the receipt from the garage log, standard procedure for every customer. He could call, check in, maybe just to be sure the car was running fine. But he didn't. He had built walls around his life for a reason. Sarah was kind, yes, and beautiful in an understated, natural way, but she was also someone with her own story, her own baggage, and Ethan knew better than to let Lily's heart latch onto something fragile. The following morning, life moved on. Ethan opened the shop, changed oil for an old neighbor, and rotated tires for a delivery van. Yet every time the bell above the garage door jingled, he half expected Sarah to walk in. By noon, he was wiping grease off his arms when Lily's voice piped up from the small play corner he'd set up for her in the office. "Daddy, can I draw her?" she asked innocently. He frowned, confused. Draw who, Bug? She held up a crayon, her eyes wide with seriousness. Her, the lady from yesterday. Miss Sarah. Ethan sighed. Lily? But before he could form a proper refusal, Lily had already set to work, her little hands moving with surprising focus. By the time Ethan walked over, she had sketched a crude but heartfelt picture. Himself, Lily, and Sarah holding hands under a big sun, with the words, "My family," written in shaky letters at the bottom. Ethan's chest tightened painfully. He wanted to tear it up, to stop her from weaving fantasies that might never come true. But when Lily looked up, her smile was so pure that he couldn't bring himself to. He patted her head instead. That's beautiful, sweetheart. 2 days later, fate made the choice for him. The garage was quiet when Sarah's sedan rolled back into the lot, this time without smoke but with her looking flustered all the same. Ethan stepped out, wiping his hands on his rag, trying to calm the strange flutter in his chest. "Car giving you trouble again?" he asked. She laughed lightly, though it was tinged with embarrassment. "No, actually, I just wanted to thank you properly. I made some lasagna last night and it's way too much for just me. I thought, maybe you and Lily could use it." She lifted a glass dish covered in foil, her cheeks faintly pink. For a moment, Ethan was speechless. No one had cooked for him in years. He cleared his throat, taking the dish carefully. "You didn't have to do this," he murmured. Sarah shrugged. "I wanted to. You helped me when I didn't know what else to do." Her eyes flicked to Lily, who had peeked out from behind Ethan's leg. Sarah crouched down, smiling warmly. "Hi, sweetheart. Do you like lasagna?" Lily nodded shyly, then whispered, "You're pretty." Sarah laughed softly, her eyes glistening, and Ethan felt his chest constrict. It was such a simple exchange, yet it filled the empty shop with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. From that day on, Sarah's visits became more frequent. Sometimes it was her car, needing a quick check, even when Ethan suspected nothing was wrong. Sometimes it was just her stopping by with a dish of muffins or cookies for Lily. And every time, Ethan found himself softening, against his will. They began talking more. He learned she taught second grade at the elementary school, that she loved books and gardening, that her divorce had been brutal but had also taught her strength. She learned Ethan's story, too, that his wife had left without warning, that he had chosen to raise Lily alone, that the garage was both his livelihood and his prison. One Saturday afternoon, when the shop was closed, Sarah invited them to a small park for a picnic. Ethan almost said no, but Lily's pleading eyes melted his resistance, so they went. Lily ran ahead with Sarah, laughing in a way Ethan hadn't seen in so long, while he carried the picnic basket behind them. Watching Sarah twirl Lily around. On the grass, Ethan felt something in his chest he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Hope. Yet hope was dangerous. That night, after he put Lily to bed, he stood by the window, staring out at the quiet street. He wanted to let it happen. The dinners, the laughter, the way Sarah made the house feel alive again. But he also knew what it meant if it didn't work out. Lily's heart wasn't strong enough to be broken again. Neither was his. The turning point came unexpectedly. It was late one evening when Sarah stopped by, her face pale, her hands trembling. Ethan rushed to meet her. "What happened?" She shook her head, tears brimming. "My ex. He's trying to take me back to court. He says I can't support myself. He wants to ruin everything I've built." Her voice cracked. Ethan didn't think twice. He pulled her inside, set her on the couch, and handed her a glass of water. Lily appeared in the doorway, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Miss Sarah?" she asked softly. Sarah wiped her tears quickly and forced a smile. "Hi, sweetheart. Sorry, I didn't mean to wake you." Lily walked closer, then without hesitation climbed onto the couch beside her and wrapped her tiny arms around Sarah's waist. "Don't cry," she whispered. "Daddy always says we fix things here. He can fix your heart, too." Ethan froze, his throat tightening as Sarah hugged Lily back, burying her face in the child's curls. And for the first time, Ethan let the walls inside him crack. He sat down beside them, resting a hand on Sarah's shoulder, and for a long time, none of them spoke. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was healing. That night, after Sarah finally left, Ethan lay awake long after Lily fell asleep, his mind replaying her whisper. "She's my mom. Please marry her." And for the first time, Ethan didn't push the thought away. He let it linger, dangerous and beautiful, in the quiet of his heart. The following weeks unfolded in ways Ethan never could have planned, yet in ways his daughter seemed to have always expected. Sarah became part of their routines, not officially, not with labels, but in quiet, natural ways that wove her into their lives. Sometimes she stopped by after work, helping Lily with homework at the little counter in the garage office while Ethan finished repairing cars. Other times, she joined them for simple dinners at their kitchen table, laughing at Lily's endless stories about her stuffed bunny's adventures. The house, which had always carried an echo of loneliness, now seemed filled with warmth, laughter, and the smell of Sarah's cooking. Ethan noticed the changes in himself, too. He was lighter somehow, quicker to smile, slower to anger. The long hours at the garage no longer felt like a sentence. They felt like a means to something greater. He found himself looking forward to evenings, not just for rest, but for the moments Sarah might stop by. And though he never said it aloud, his heart was slowly stitching itself back together, thread by thread, with every smile she gave him. Lily, of course, noticed everything. Children didn't need words to see love forming. They felt it like sunlight on their skin. She began drawing more pictures, always of 3 people holding hands under a bright sun. Sometimes she added a house with flowers, sometimes a picnic blanket, but always the same trio: Daddy, Lily, and Miss Sarah. Each time she presented her masterpiece, Ethan would ruffle her hair and pretend not to notice the hopeful gleam in her eyes, though secretly those pictures shook him more than anything else. Yet, as much as his heart wanted to surrender, Ethan's mind never let him forget the risks. Sarah was still healing from her past. He was still guarded from his. What if she wasn't ready? What if she changed her mind? What if Lily grew attached, only to have her heart shattered again? These questions haunted him in the quiet hours of the night, questions he never dared voice aloud. One crisp autumn evening, Sarah invited them to a school event. "It's just a little harvest fair," she explained, smiling nervously. "Games, food, a raffle. I thought Lily might enjoy it." Lily's squeal of delight sealed the deal before Ethan could protest, so they went. The fair was held on the school's wide front lawn, string lights glowing in the dusky air, the smell of popcorn and pumpkin pie drifting everywhere. Children ran with painted faces, parents chatted by stalls, and soft music floated from a live band near the stage. Lily clutched Sarah's hand almost instantly, pulling her toward the games. Ethan trailed behind, hands in his jacket pockets, watching the two of them laugh together as though they had always belonged. At one booth, Sarah won Lily a small stuffed bear by tossing rings onto bottles. Lily squealed with joy, hugging it tightly, and then did something that nearly undid Ethan completely. She handed her ragged old bunny to Sarah. "You keep her safe," Lily said seriously, "'cause now I have this one." Sarah's eyes shimmered as she accepted the worn toy, holding it carefully as if it were made of glass. She glanced at Ethan then, her gaze soft but filled with something that made his pulse quicken. Later that evening, after Lily had fallen, asleep in the back seat on the drive home, Ethan found himself stealing glances at Sarah. The way her hair glowed under the passing streetlights, the quiet peace on her face, the way she gently adjusted the blanket over Lily's small body, it all pierced through him like sunlight breaking through clouds. By the time they pulled into his driveway, Ethan knew he couldn't keep pretending he didn't feel something. But fear held him back. Instead of speaking, he mumbled a soft, "Thanks for tonight," as she stepped out of the car. She gave him a lingering smile, one that seemed to say she understood everything he couldn't put into words. Then she left, and the silence of the night closed in again. Days turned into weeks, and their bond only deepened. Still, Ethan said nothing. It was Lily who finally forced the truth out. One evening, as Sarah was helping Lily with spelling words, at the kitchen table, Lily suddenly blurted, "Daddy, why don't you just ask her to stay forever?" The room fell silent. Ethan nearly dropped the dish he was drying. Sarah froze mid-word, her cheeks flushing crimson. Lily looked between them with the innocent boldness only a child could have. "You love her," she said matter-of-factly, "and I do too. So why can't she just be ours?" Ethan's heart pounded. He knelt beside Lily, trying to steady his voice. "Bug, things like that are complicated." Lily frowned. "No, they're not. You fix cars, Daddy. You fix everything. Why can't you fix this?" She looked at Sarah then, her eyes shimmering with hope. "You want to stay, don't you?" Sarah's lips parted, her eyes filling with emotion. She reached across the table, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "I love spending time with you, more than anything. But—" Her voice trailed off, her gaze flicking briefly to Ethan. There was so much unspoken in that look: fear, longing, hesitation, and something Ethan dared not name. The conversation ended there, but the air remained heavy with what hadn't been said. That night, after Sarah left, Ethan sat on the porch long after Lily had gone to bed, staring at the stars. He wanted so badly to reach out, to tell Sarah what she meant to them, what she was becoming in their lives. But the weight of past abandonment chained him down. What if he wasn't enough? What if she left too, just like his wife? The answer came unexpectedly in the form of Sarah's ex. One Saturday afternoon, Ethan was closing the garage when a sleek black car pulled up. A tall man in a tailored suit stepped out, his eyes sharp and cold. "You must be Ethan," he said, his tone laced with disdain. "I'm Daniel, Sarah's ex-husband." Ethan stiffened. "What do you want?" Daniel smirked. "To warn you. Don't get too comfortable. Sarah has a history of making poor choices. She doesn't belong here, in some run-down garage with a mechanic and his kid. She'll come back to her senses soon enough." Ethan clenched his fists, anger simmering. But before he could respond, Sarah herself appeared. She had been walking from her car across the street, holding a bag of groceries. Her face went pale as she spotted Daniel. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. Daniel shrugged. "Just making sure you haven't completely lost your mind." His eyes flicked to Ethan, then back to her. "You'll get tired of playing house soon enough. And when you do, don't expect me to pick up the pieces." Sarah's hands trembled, but her voice was firm. "You don't get to control me anymore, Daniel. Not here, not ever again." Daniel's smirk faltered, but he turned away without another word, sliding back into his car and speeding off. The silence he left behind was deafening. Ethan looked at Sarah, who was blinking back tears, her shoulders tense. Without thinking, he reached out and took the grocery bag from her hand, setting it aside before gently pulling her into his arms. She resisted for only a second before collapsing against him, her body shaking. "I'm sorry," she whispered into his chest. "I didn't want you to see that part of my life." Ethan held her tighter, his voice low but steady. "You don't have to be sorry. Not with me, not with us." When she finally pulled back, her eyes met his, And for the first time, there was no hesitation between them. The walls crumbled. Ethan leaned in, and their lips met in a kiss that was tender, hesitant, yet filled with years of unspoken longing. And though neither of them said it out loud, both knew in that moment that everything had just changed. The kiss lingered in Ethan's mind long after Sarah left that night. It wasn't just the softness of her lips or the warmth of her touch, it was what it meant. For years, Ethan had locked his heart behind walls of fear, convincing himself that love was a luxury he could never afford again. But in that moment, every wall had crumbled. And though the thought of opening himself up terrified him, the idea of not doing so scared him even more. The next few weeks carried a new rhythm, one that felt fragile yet full of promise. Sarah was no longer just a visitor to their lives. She was part of them. She joined them for breakfast on Sundays, reading the comics section aloud while Lily giggled at her silly voices. She and Ethan worked side by side at the garage on slower days. He taught her how to check oil levels. She teased him about the grease smudges on his face. In the evenings, when Lily was tucked into bed, they often sat on the porch together, talking about dreams they'd never dared to speak aloud before. But as their bond deepened, so too did Ethan's fear. He couldn't forget Daniel's cruel words, or the possibility that Sarah might one day regret choosing him. And though he knew Sarah cared deeply for him and Lily, the unspoken question hung between them. Was this forever, or just for now? The answer came one chilly December evening. The garage was quiet, the smell of pine drifting from the little tree Lily had insisted they decorate early. Ethan was tightening bolts under the hood of a truck when he heard laughter, a sound so light and joyful it made him pause. He wiped his hands and peeked into the office, where Sarah and Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, wrapping presents in colorful paper. Lily's cheeks were flushed with excitement as she whispered something in Sarah's ear, and Sarah laughed again, her eyes glowing in a way Ethan had never seen before. For a moment, Ethan just stood there, taking it in. This was what family looked like, not the kind he had lost, but the kind he had been given a second chance to build. And it was then that he knew. He couldn't keep waiting. Life was too short, too unpredictable. If Lily had been brave enough to voice her heart weeks ago, he had to be brave enough now. That night after Lily went to bed, Ethan asked Sarah to join him on the porch. The winter air was crisp, their breaths visible in the moonlight. Ethan's hands trembled slightly, but his voice was steady. "Sarah," he began, "I need to say something. For a long time, I told myself I couldn't let anyone in. That it was safer to keep things the way they were. But then you showed up and Lily, she saw what I was too scared to admit. You've become part of our lives, and I don't want to imagine it without you. So," he swallowed, pulling a small box from his jacket pocket. He hadn't planned it. He'd bought the ring a week earlier, on a restless impulse, but now it felt right. He opened it, revealing a simple silver band. "I don't have fancy words and I don't have much to offer, but I do have my heart. Will you marry me?" Sarah's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Tears spilled before she could speak. For a long moment, she just shook her head, not in refusal, but in disbelief. "Ethan, are you sure?" she whispered. "After everything, after what I've been through, what you've been through, are you really ready for this?" Ethan reached for her hand, holding it firmly. "I've never been more sure. You don't have to be perfect. I don't either. But together, we can be whole. Lily already knows it. She's been waiting for me to catch up." At that, Sarah let out a shaky laugh, her tears falling freely. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes. Ethan, I'll marry you." Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, his own eyes burning. And in that quiet, starlit moment, every broken piece of his past seemed to find its place again. The next morning, Lily woke to find Sarah in the kitchen, wearing the ring. Her eyes grew wide as she gasped. "You said yes?" she squealed, throwing her arms around Sarah's waist. Sarah laughed through her tears. "I did, sweetheart." Lily looked up at her father then, her face glowing. "See, Daddy? I told you she was my mom." Sometimes a child's whisper carries the wisdom we adults are too afraid to hear. This story reminds us that love, second chances, and family can be found in the most unexpected places. If this touched your heart, share it with someone who still believes in love, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Kindness Vibes for more emotional stories that heal, inspire, and remind us of the beauty of kindness. The wedding wasn't grand. They didn't need it to be. It was held in the small-town church, surrounded by friends, neighbors, and children from Sarah's school. Lily served proudly as the flower girl, scattering petals with more enthusiasm than precision, and when Ethan and Sarah exchanged vows, Lily clapped so loudly the whole room laughed. Afterward, at the modest reception in the church hall, Ethan found a quiet moment to kneel beside Lily. She was munching on a cupcake, her cheeks smeared with frosting, but her eyes sparkled with, "You were right, Bug," he said softly. She was the missing piece. Lily grinned, hugging him tightly. "Told you, Daddy. You just had to fix it." Years later, Ethan would look back on that day as the moment everything truly began. Life wasn't perfect. There were still bills to pay, long hours at the garage, and challenges that tested them. But through it all, they faced it together. And every time Ethan saw Sarah reading to Lily at night, or felt her hand in his as they walked down the street, he was reminded of the truth he had once been too afraid to see. Sometimes, the greatest repairs aren't the ones you make with tools, but the ones made with love. And it all started with a broken car, a whispered plea from a little girl, and the courage to say yes.